Heaven Officials Blessing Episode 10. In the previous episode, tensions in the heavenly court reached a breaking point. Lang Qianshu, overwhelmed by the truth he believed he had uncovered, challenged Xie Lian to a duel, one fought with only one hand. Insisting that even such a handicap would expose whether Xie Lian was truly the one responsible for the tragedy that shaped his life. Though injured and barely standing, Lang Qianshu's determination burned fiercely, while the gods around them watched in stunned silence. Xie Lian, calm yet burdened by emotions no one else could read, accepted the challenge without hesitation, taking hold of the offered blade with a single hand. The hall froze as mentor and disciple stood across from each other, the weight of their past and the threat of what might come hanging heavily between them. At the end of the previous episode, the air was thick with anticipation, two fates intertwined, one truth waiting to be revealed, and a battle no one could stop. What will happen next? Stay tuned. And the story continues. Although the words were an understatement lightly said, it caused all those around to take in a harsh breath. The air in the dimly lit chamber seemed to tighten as Xie Lian stepped forward, his eyes calm yet carrying an unspoken intensity. The room, already heavy with the weight of anticipation, now seemed to shrink around him. He could feel the subtle tremor of fear and curiosity emanating from those who stood nearby. Unsure of what to expect, despite the eerie quiet, there was an underlying current, a pulse of unspoken energy that seemed to vibrate with every heartbeat, echoing against the stone walls. Xie Lian's gaze swept the room with an almost gentle authority. He did not need to speak loudly, his presence alone carried weight. Yet, the words that followed pierced through the tension with precise clarity. Every listener instinctively held their breath, sensing that what was about to unfold would shift the balance of their understanding entirely. The Crown Prince, standing slightly behind, watched with a mixture of awe and cautious apprehension. He could not deny the magnetic pull of Xie Lian's aura, a quiet storm. Measured but formidable, it was as if Xie Lian existed partly within this world and partly beyond it, straddling the boundary between mortal and divine. Each gesture, each subtle movement, conveyed layers of meaning that could not be fully grasped at a glance. Then, Xie Lian's eyes focused on Hua Cheng, whose face remained an unreadable mask. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Even the faintest drafts of air appeared to hesitate. Xie Lian's words, carefully chosen and lightly spoken, struck like a key turning in an ancient lock. They were both simple and profound, hinting at truths that stretched far beyond the immediate moment. It was as if he were opening a door not just to the past, but to hidden dimensions of fate and consequence. As the silence stretched, Hua Cheng stepped closer. There was no rush, no urgency, only a deliberate and measured approach that seemed to defy conventional expectation. The tension between them was palpable, yet not violent. Instead, it carried an almost hypnotic quality, pulling every observer into the gravity of their interaction. Xie Lian remained composed, allowing Hua Cheng to approach without flinching, without a single gesture betraying fear or uncertainty. The Crown Prince, meanwhile, felt his own pulse quicken. He had witnessed courage before, bravery in the face of insurmountable odds. But this was different. It was not mere courage, it was a serenity born of understanding, of deep knowledge, and perhaps, of resignation to the truths that could not be avoided. He realized, with a shiver, that Xie Lian's power was not just in skill or technique, but in the quiet command of presence, in the way he could bend perception without raising a hand. Hua Cheng finally reached the center, directly across from Xie Lian. For a fleeting instant, their eyes locked. Time itself seemed to fracture, moments stretching and folding over each other. Xie Lian could see it then, the flicker of recognition, the subtle acknowledgement that past grievances, mysteries, and veiled identities were finally converging. Words became secondary to the unspoken dialogue flowing between them, a language composed of glances, of measured breathing, of the silent rhythm of heartbeats aligned in tension and anticipation. A subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere, almost imperceptible but undeniable. The room seemed to exhale, as if even the walls were adjusting to the gravity of the encounter. Shadows deepened, stretching across the floor in intricate patterns, and the faint scent of dust and old stone hung heavily in the air. Xie Lian remained a pillar of stillness amidst the imperceptible chaos. Aware of every detail, the faint rustle of fabric, the barely audible intake of breath, the slight tensing of muscles as if the entire assembly were bracing for a movement that might never come. Then came the first act of revelation. Xie Lian spoke a single sentence, measured and deliberate, yet it resonated with a weight far beyond its brevity. Hua Cheng's expression twitched subtly, a microcosm of shock, recognition, and calculation. The crown prince watched, stunned by the layers of meaning embedded in what was, on the surface, so simple. Each word seemed to carry echoes of countless histories, both personal and cosmic, hinting at betrayals, alliances, and secrets long buried beneath layers of circumstance. The tension escalated, not through loud confrontation but through the careful interplay of presence and perception. Xie Lian's demeanor never wavered, he remained a fixed point, a calm center in a storm of expectation. Hua Cheng shifted slightly, a subtle movement that spoke volumes, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his lips suggesting both amusement and recognition. Observers could sense a complex negotiation unfolding, not of words, but of intent and understanding. A silent chess game played in the space between breaths. Then, unexpectedly, the air itself seemed to respond. A chill ran through the chamber, and the faint outlines of shapes began to emerge in the corners of vision, shadows coalescing into something almost tangible. As if the room itself were aware of the stakes of this encounter. The crown prince felt a shiver run down his spine. He had read of spirits, of energies that could bend perception. Yet nothing prepared him for the visceral sense of power radiating from Xie Lian. A power so quiet yet so absolute that it seemed to bend reality around him. Xie Lian's attention remained fixed on Hua Cheng, yet he was acutely aware of the others in the room, their every micro-expression catalogued and understood. He did not act out of malice, nor out of arrogance. Every motion, every glance, was deliberate, an extension of both wisdom and strategy. Hua Cheng, meanwhile, appeared almost casual, but the subtleties of his posture, the controlled tension in his limbs, betrayed the fact that he understood perfectly the danger and the opportunity present in the exchange. The moment stretched, elongated by the weight of anticipation. The room's atmosphere thickened, each breath drawing in a mix of apprehension and fascination. Xie Lian finally made a slight gesture, not overt, barely perceptible, and the effect was instantaneous. The shadows shifted, responding to his will, the faint currents of energy around them quivering like strings of an unseen instrument. Every observer could feel it, a subtle, almost imperceptible tuning of reality, where the natural order bent just enough to remind them that Xie Lian was not a man to be underestimated. Hua Cheng responded in kind, a deliberate act that mirrored Xie Lian's intent. Their energies collided in silence, a subtle and profound communication that conveyed more than any words could. It was a test, a challenge, and a revelation all at once. Each participant in the room became acutely aware of their role as witness, feeling the silent narrative unfold around them. This was more than confrontation, it was recognition, acknowledgement, and an intricate dance of power and history intertwined. As the exchange reached its apex, the crown prince felt his own understanding shift. What he had thought of as courage or dominance was revealed to be something far deeper, the embodiment of presence, of command, and of truth. Xie Lian stood unwavering, a beacon of composure and strategy, while Hua Cheng mirrored and opposed him with equal mastery. The subtle tension between them created a tapestry of anticipation, layered with unspoken history and veiled intentions. ANDFROMWITHINTHE darkness.INNUMEROUSCHILLINGSILVERSHEMERED Silver shimmered turbulently, and without thinking, Xie Lian's first reaction was to block with his hand, and the Ruo Yi on his arm, if the situation called for it, would attack automatically. The silver butterflies swirled violently, like an endless storm of living metal, their wings beating with the force of a gale. Xie Lian's first instinct was to defend himself, though his calm mind noted something peculiar. The creatures were not coming at him, Instead, they veered sharply, surrounding the two figures behind him who had been engaged in hand-to-hand combat only moments ago. Feng Xin and Mu Qing, seasoned and battle-hardened, immediately recognized the danger of these wraith butterflies. Both raised their hands simultaneously, shouting the incantation that would summon an invisible shield to protect them. Millions of these silver butterflies surged forward, flapping furiously, their combined force like a relentless hurricane. Yet the magical barrier held, each butterfly crashing against it with the intensity of a thunderstorm, sparks flying from the friction. Even so, the pressure was immense. Despite their spiritual defense, the shield seemed to strain under the unending assault. A single moment of carelessness could allow the enemy to gain the upper hand. The butterflies would push closer and overwhelm them if the shield wavered, if they released it. There would be no chance to draw their weapons. Both Feng Xin and Mu Qing gritted their teeth, mentally swearing to hold their ground. Feng Xin's eyes darted to Xie Lian. He was still standing in the same spot, calm, his head slightly lowered. Alarmed, Feng Xin called out, "Your Highness, don't just stand there, come behind the shield." Xie Lian, turning his head, seemed confused. Not a single hair was disturbed on him. He frowned softly and murmured, "Huh?" Feng Xin and Mu Qing's disbelief escalated as they saw the cause. A single silver butterfly had landed gently on Xie Lian's outstretched palm. Earlier, it had struggled to keep up with the furious swarm, flapping its wings weakly. Without thinking, Xie Lian had extended his hand beneath it, and the butterfly had settled, refusing to fly away. "Don't touch that thing with your hand." Both Feng Xin and Mu Qing almost screamed, veins popping in shock and frustration. Before they could react further, Xie Lian felt a sudden force on his wrist. Someone grabbed him and pulled with such strength that he was swept into the darkness beyond the palace doors. Yet instead of fear or panic, the darkness felt protective, like a gentle armor surrounding him, calming his senses rather than threatening them. The familiar presence of the silver butterflies made it obvious who had intercepted him. Mu Qing's voice rang out in disbelief. What audacity, to come all the way to the heavenly court. Such arrogance. A calm, familiar laugh echoed in the darkness, tinged with amusement. "We're all the same, aren't we? Wasn't the upper court impudent in my territory?" Even knowing who it was, Xie Lian could not suppress a slight startle at hearing the voice so close. Feng Xin, straining through the communication array, shouted furiously, "Hua Cheng, the heavenly martial emperor is here. Release him at once." Hua Cheng's response was calm, almost teasing, "Then let's see if you have the skill." With that, the massive palace doors closed behind them with a resonant bang. Xie Lian could feel Hua Cheng's grip, firm and precise, as they moved through a landscape of black darkness and uneven ground. The jingling of silver bells from Hua Cheng's boots echoed rhythmically, heightening the surreal sensation of being transported far from the golden roads of heaven to a remote, untamed valley. Xie Lian realized quickly that Hua Cheng had likely used a distance-shortening array to traverse the distance in an instant, a feat only a few skilled heavenly officials could manage. Though he wanted to question him, the roar of Feng Xin's voice in his ears cut off any chance for conversation. "Your Highness, where are you?" The communication array erupted in chaos. Mu Qing joined in. "Where's Ling Wen? Report immediately. Xie Lian has escaped." Ling Wen reacted immediately, rushing to the palace of XianLe to verify the situation. Officials argued and panicked, struggling to understand how someone detained so securely could vanish. Shi Qingzhan confirmed that entry into the palace was one way only. Yet Xie Lian was gone. Feng Xin shouted in exasperation. "He didn't run away. He was kidnapped. Can you hear us? Where are you right now?" Amidst the chaos, Hua Cheng, with a casual laugh, touched Xie Lian's temple with 2 fingers. His voice penetrated the communication array, reaching everyone within it. The room fell completely silent, a heavy and tense stillness sweeping over the gathered heavenly officials. Hua Cheng's voice, teasing and commanding all at once, carried effortlessly. "Long time no see. How's everyone doing? I don't know if you've missed me, but I didn't think about any of you at all. However, I've been fairly free recently. If anyone feels bored and wants to tussle with me, by all means." They're welcome to. The meaning was clear. Any attempt to pursue would be futile. Hua Cheng's casual threat made all prior excitement and readiness vanish instantly. The Crimson Rain, as bold and fearless as he was, had now fully asserted dominance. Xie Lian, though aware of the chaos his capture had caused, kept his composure. Walking behind Hua Cheng, he reflected on the aftermath of Paradise Manor's destruction, the investigations, and his own feelings of guilt. San Lang, I'm sorry, he said quietly. Hua Cheng paused, slightly frustrated. Why are you apologizing? Xie Lian explained. I went to the Ghost City to investigate the missing Earth Master. I didn't tell you the truth, yet you treated me with utmost hospitality, and I even burned down your Paradise Manor. I feel really bad. Hua Cheng's voice softened, yet carried a sharp edge. Why do you have to repay me? Did you forget that my blade wounded your arm? I hurt you, not the other way around. Xie Lian realized he had completely forgotten about the injury. My right arm? It's fine. It'll recover soon. Besides, it's only because I rushed forward to strike. You're not to blame. As they moved in the darkness, Xie Lian noticed a subtle tremble in Hua Cheng's scimitar. Yi Ming, its silver eye-like contour shaking as if in silent sobs. Thatsilver scimitar.hunguponred robes.wasshking nonstop.theyecontontournewasilverlinewasalso trembling.ifitwasteyeofa child.tenthis child.atthatmomentin time.mustbeba WLINGWITH tears. Seeing its state, Xie Lian unconsciously reached out, wanting to pet it. What's wrong? But Hua Cheng sidestepped and turned his body slightly, avoiding Xie Lian's touch, and smacked hard on the hilt. Nothing's wrong. Don't mind it. Xie Lian's attention immediately went to the cursed blade. Yi Ming, the scimitar that had long been feared throughout the heavens. The blade shook violently, trembling as if it sensed the tension in the air. In the distance, the communication array crackled to life, and Feng Xin's voice rang out, strained and urgent. How did Hua Cheng connect the distance-shortening array to the heavenly court? How do we open this door? Shi Qingzhan's voice joined in, tinged with both excitement and panic. General Nan Yang, me, I think I know how. When His Highness and I faced Hua Cheng's trick before, we had to roll 2 dice and toss them before the door, then push to see if it would open. Xie Lian froze, remembering the earlier scene in the main hall where he had casually tossed dice for fun, unaware at the time of the deeper purpose behind such an action. He could still recall the terrifying moments running through the earthworm-infested cave and fleeing from cannibalistic savages. Now, the thought of rolling the dice and opening doors to unknown dangers made him shudder. Stop, don't, be careful, he cried. But his words never reached the communication array. His spiritual power was nearly depleted, allowing him only to listen. Even without Xie Lian's warning, Feng Xin followed Shi Qingzhan's instructions without hesitation. Almost immediately, he began cursing, letting out words so vulgar that even the heavens would have blushed, leaving the officials on the other side of the array trying hard not to laugh. Mu Qing's voice sounded dismayed as well. What is this place? It seemed he had entered the door with Feng Xin. Shi Qingzhan's voice rang out urgently. Warning, be careful, guys. Different rolls lead to different places. What number did you get? He rolled a 4, Mu Qing replied. Xie Lian could hear the panic in Feng Xin's voice, as the two generals were clearly facing an extremely dangerous place. He called out in his mind, San Lang, what does a roll of 4 open to? Hua Cheng's calm voice replied, it depends. The door will open to whatever the roller fears most. At that moment, Mu Qing, seizing the dice, exclaimed, you rolled first and ended up in a women's bath. Let me roll next. Xie Lian instinctively covered his face, knowing Feng Xin would consider a women's bath more terrifying than even tiger caves or dragon lakes. Their next roll led them into a black marsh, sinking past their waists into mud so thick and stinking that it seemed to swallow them whole. Immediately, Over a dozen grotesque black crocodiles, each more than 4 meters long and with unnervingly human limbs, emerged from the swamp. These were monsters that fed on human flesh, grown through dark and twisted practices. The scene was terrifying, yet Xie Lian knew that being martial gods, Feng Xin and Mu Qing were capable, and that the monsters were merely nuisances rather than true threats. Xie Lian sighed in relief when the two seemed to finally give up on rolling dice, though not before arguing violently over whose luck was worse. Meanwhile, Xie Lian himself had rolled a safe number, the equivalent of snake eyes, which meant he could see Hua Cheng. The moment he expressed this thought aloud, Hua Cheng replied simply, "No, if you wanted to see me, it would not matter what you roll. I will appear." Xie Lian's heart swelled and he forgot everything else he had intended to say. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flash of white light, accompanied by a crashing sound. When the light cleared, they found their path blocked by a sword, half buried in the ground, black as jade, smooth as mirror, with a thin silver-white line cutting its surface. Feng Xin. A shadow appeared and said, "This is your sword." It was Lang Qianchu, the crown prince of Yong'an, who had thrown the sword to block their path. This meant that Feng Xin and Mu Qing's attempts had failed, but Lang Qianchu had rolled the right numbers, as if fortune always favored him over Xie Lian. Hua Cheng stood silently nearby, and Xie Lian, understanding the situation, stepped forward to claim the sword. He lifted Feng Xin from the ground and whispered softly, "You asked for this." After hundreds of years, the sword finally returned to its master, moaning softly in his hands. Hua Cheng's eyes shone with quiet joy at the familiar sound of the sword. With Feng Xin in hand, Xie Lian confronted Lang Qianchu. He swung the sword and pointed it to the ground, speaking coolly, "However this duel ends, do not regret it." Lang Qianchu shouted, "I will never." He readied himself, gripping his oversized longsword tightly, eyes locked on Feng Xin. Xie Lian dashed like an arrow, and just as Lang Qianchu prepared to strike, a white silk band wrapped around him, binding him tightly to the ground. He struggled furiously, but the more he fought, the tighter the binding became. Xie Lian calmly noted that this was one of his spiritual devices, a clever solution to restrain a highly skilled opponent without unnecessary bloodshed. Lang Qianchu protested indignantly, "How can this count? I meant to fight with swords, not be ambushed with a ribbon." Xie Lian, unfazed, knelt beside him and said seriously, "You didn't think things through, and never said I had to use a sword. I used your loophole, so who are you going to tell? Yes, I ambushed you. Yes, I succeeded. Yes, I was cunning. But so what? I won. If your opponent had been anyone else, you would already be dead." Hua Cheng stood nearby, silent and amused, as Xie Lian's words struck at the core of Lang Qianchu, who realized the once straightforward Guoxi of Yang and had grown into a masterful strategist, unafraid to bend the rules to secure victory. After saying his fill, Xie Lian stood up. "Think about it on your own. Next time, don't get in others' way." Seeing that he was about to walk away, Lang Qianchu immediately called out, "Stop." Xie Lian stopped. Lang Qianchu gritted his teeth and finally ground out, "You owe me an explanation." Xie Lian paused, his eyes briefly flicking toward Lang Qianchu, reading the raw mixture of anger, confusion, and wounded pride in the other's expression. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned slowly to face him, the motion deliberate, as if weighing the consequences of every word. The wind stirred faintly around them, lifting strands of hair and carrying the faint scent of the river below. There was an almost palpable tension in the air, a silence that seemed to demand confession. Lang Qianchu's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I don't understand," he said finally, voice tight, trembling with restraint. Why did you come here? Do what you did, and then act as if nothing happened?" His gaze was sharp, demanding, a blade poised at the truth he desperately wanted to extract. Xie Lian's expression softened slightly, though a quiet weariness settled over his features. "You expect a simple answer," he said quietly, "but life isn't simple. And what I did, I did because there was no other way. Nothing else would have protected those who cannot protect themselves. He spoke in measured tones, carefully, as though each word might carry weight far beyond their immediate meaning. Lang Qianchu's brow furrowed. That doesn't explain why you disappeared afterward. Do you know how it felt? To see someone I trusted, just vanish? You left me to deal with everything on my own. His voice rose slightly, the vulnerability beneath his anger bleeding through despite his efforts to maintain composure. Xie Lian's eyes shifted downward, the faintest shadow of guilt passing over his face. I did not leave to abandon you, he said softly. I left because staying would have put you in danger. And as for what happened, you need to see it not as my choice, but as necessity. He paused, drawing in a breath, letting the words settle. I cannot always protect everyone, but I can try to prevent more suffering, even if it means walking away. The wind rustled through the trees as Lang Qianchu stepped closer. Frustration and disbelief etched across his features. You think that's enough? That your intentions make it right? You think because you were trying to prevent suffering, everything you did is justified? His voice wavered now, a mixture of anger, hurt, and exhaustion, revealing how deeply this betrayal had cut. Xie Lian's gaze hardened just slightly, not in anger, but in clarity. Justice is not always the measure of right or wrong, he replied. Sometimes, what is necessary is simply survival, and survival does not always allow for explanations in the moment. His tone was calm, almost detached, but there was an underlying intensity, a quiet force that made it impossible for Lang Qianchu to dismiss the truth in his words. Lang Qianchu shook his head, swallowing. So you just let me wonder, let me suffer without knowing. You don't think that matters? It does, Xie Lian admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. It matters more than you can know. But I cannot undo the past. I can only move forward, trying to make things right in the way I can. He took a step back, not retreating, but signaling the distance his role demanded. I owe you explanations, yes, but there are some things that cannot be explained without showing the consequences first. Lang Qianchu's expression softened slightly, a mixture of reluctant understanding and lingering frustration. You always speak in riddles, he said quietly, a hint of exasperation and admiration mingled together. Even when you are supposed to be honest, you guard your heart behind layers of words. Xie Lian allowed himself a faint smile, the corners of his lips barely lifting. Perhaps, but words alone cannot convey the truth of action. You will understand, eventually, as you see the effects of what has been done. He stepped forward then, bridging the space between them. The movement slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if the simple act of standing near each other carried weight. He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out the small, intricately carved statue he had brought with him. The light caught on its surface, revealing fine details. The careful etching of the eyes, the delicate curve of the mouth, the lifelike tilt of the head. This is part of the truth, he said, holding it out for Lang Qianchu to see. It may not answer everything, but it is a piece. And sometimes, seeing is the only way to understand. Lang Qianchu leaned closer, eyes narrowing in concentration as he examined the figure. It looks familiar, he murmured, as though some memory stirred in the depths of his mind. Where did you get this? Xie Lian's gaze was steady, unwavering. It is from a place long forgotten, from a time you may not yet remember. But it is connected to what we are, to what we have endured. He let the silence hang, letting the weight of history, pain, and shared experience fill the space between them. Lang Qianchu finally nodded, a flicker of understanding passing across his face, tempered by lingering doubt. I do not know if I can forgive, not yet, but I see your intent. Even if I do not fully understand it, I see it. Xie Lian inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the gesture, though his mind was already turning forward, planning steps that could not yet be revealed. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, the leaves trembling as if echoing the fragile bridge of trust being tentatively rebuilt between them. He turned then, gently placing the statue on a flat surface, allowing it to rest under the soft glow of the fading sun. This will remain here, he said quietly, as a reminder, not of what we have lost, but of what we must protect going forward. And perhaps, someday, it will reveal truths even we do not yet see. Lang Qianchu's eyes followed him, lingering on the figure as if trying to divine meaning from the delicate craftsmanship. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words, regrets, and possibilities. Slowly, a sense of uneasy resolution settled over both of them, the tension between duty and personal bonds finding a temporary balance. Xie Lian's final glance at Lang Qianchu carried no arrogance, no pretense, only the quiet certainty of someone who had endured much and carried even more. "We will face what comes next," he said, his voice soft but resolute, "and perhaps, in time, everything will make sense." Lang Qianchu did not reply immediately, only nodded once, sharply, a signal of tentative trust and understanding. He turned away slightly, still looking at the statue, absorbing its silent message. Xie Lian didn't need to turn the statue around to know that its face must be exactly the same as his. Generally, people would not know how their own backs looked like. But Xie Lian was different. He was more than familiar with how his own back looked. Xie Lian's eyes traced the outlines of the kneeling statues that littered the towns. A reminder of the kingdom of XianLe's fall. People had burned down his temple of 8,000 crowned princes, desecrated his statues, stripped the gems from his sword, and removed all gold from his attire. Yet the fury of the people did not subside. They had created new statues of him. The crown prince, sculpted in humiliating postures, kneeling, begging for forgiveness, even prostrating, so that the townspeople could spit, kick, and trample over them to rid themselves of misfortune. These statues were placed in crowded streets, serving as constant reminders of the fallen prince. After so many years, it was impossible for Xie Lian not to recognize the shape of his own back, molded into stone in countless towns. A young voice suddenly cut through the air with harsh curses. Someone, furious and petty, was ranting about Pei Su and Pei Ming, referring to them as nothing but exiled dogs, obsessed with humiliating him and ruining his plans. Xie Lian's attention shifted as a figure clad in green floated into the cave. This man wore a mask, surrounded by little green ghosts, exuding an aura of authority. It was one of the four evils of the ghost realm, Green Ghost Qi Rong. Ever since Nan Feng had first mentioned Qi Rong, Xie Lian had wondered if this was the same person he knew. Names were deceptive among demons and ghosts. A rule unspoken yet universally respected. The dead and the immortal alike hid their true identities. Still, Xie Lian could not dismiss the familiarity, the obsession with the kneeling crown prince statues. The voice, it all pointed to the same Qi Rong he remembered. The little green ghosts around Qi Rong were noisy, praising him as their king. And from the chaos, Xie Lian pieced together recent events. Qi Rong had sent his henchmen to the ghost city, only for them to be decimated by Hua Cheng. Reassembling, Qi Rong prepared to strike again. But his forces had collided with exiled Pei Su in the mortal realm, and were once again defeated. Enraged, Qi Rong unleashed a string of profanities, cursing Pei Ming, Pei Su, and countless others with venomous intent. Unlike ordinary swearing, this was raw malice. He wanted genuine suffering inflicted on his enemies. Despite Xie Lian's attempts to focus, Qi Rong's words painted a vivid picture of chaos, malice, and meticulous plotting. The ghosts under Qi Rong's command desecrated temples, masquerading as devotees to incite riots. The plan was audacious, immoral, and entirely dangerous. Xie Lian quietly noted that Zhen Wu should be warned of potential fallout, for the scheme targeted heavenly officials and could provoke conflict. Meanwhile, Qi Rong lounged on a statue of Xie Lian's former form, using it as a footrest. This act of desecration would have been shocking to many, but Xie Lian considered it inconsequential. It was merely stone, a representation, not himself. Even as he wrote the words, "Thanks, listen," and "Heaven," in Hua Cheng's palm, he conveyed gratitude and caution silently, knowing Hua Cheng understood fully. Qi Rong asked about his henchmen and whether Pei Ming and Quan Yi Zhen had begun their confrontation, signaling his obsession with power struggles. He shifted attention to rumors spread to stir unrest. The aim to unsettle Pei Ming, Xie Lian followed closely, observing the manipulation of human and ghost alike. The intricate web of deceit Qi Rong had spun. Suddenly, Hua Cheng stepped out from within the crowd, moving with calm assurance. Despite his incredible strength, he did not reveal his true form, maintaining the guise of a simple young man. The little green ghosts reacted instantly, raising weapons and shouting, yet Hua Cheng remained unbothered. He addressed them with a casual, yet commanding remark, "Won't you all show a little respect in the presence of XianLe royalty?" His words halted the chaos momentarily, and Qi Rong, masked and enraged, demanded to know which branch of the XianLe royal blood Hua Cheng claimed. Hua Cheng replied, unruffled, "The Prince and Le." This revelation shook the room. Prince and Le was the last known royal bloodline of XianLe, considered dead for years, a fact Qi Rong could not reconcile with. Qi Rong's rage exploded. He ordered the little green ghosts to attack, but Hua Cheng, with a single swift movement, appeared behind him, grabbing the back of Qi Rong's head and slamming it into the ground with terrifying ease. The luxurious throne shattered under the impact, dust and debris flying through the cave. Xie Lian instinctively shielded a nearby child and the terrified father, but Hua Cheng moved methodically, taking control of the scene with frightening precision. Qi Rong screamed in rage, his mask cracking as bloodied fragments fell away. Hua Cheng's movements were swift, precise, and brutal, yet there was a cold amusement in his actions, as though he relished the spectacle. Even as he laughed, his eyes shone with a terrifying intensity, a power that left no doubt of his dominance. He struck Qi Rong repeatedly, embedding him into the ground, and chaos erupted as humans and ghosts alike fled. Xie Lian tried to warn them, but instinct and fear overpowered reason. Finally, Hua Cheng knelt, pulling Qi Rong's head from the ground, lifting his entire body with ease, examining him with detached amusement. The green ghost's mask broke further, revealing a startling truth. The features beneath bore an uncanny resemblance to the crown prince of XianLe. A ghost, a god, yet one visage mirrored the other. The Green Ghost Qi Rong and the Crown Prince of XianLe. One ghost, one god, a difference of hell and heaven, looked very much alike. In this episode, we saw Xie Lian facing the aftermath of the kingdom of XianLe's fall, witnessing the desecration of his statues and temples, and understanding how deeply the people's anger had scarred his past. We followed the scheming of the Green Ghost Qi Rong, who attempted to manipulate and cause chaos in the mortal and ghost realms. While Xie Lian observed the unfolding events carefully, we saw Pei Su's intervention and his skillful handling of Qi Rong's henchmen, showing that power and ability often outweigh mere influence or rank. The tension escalated when Hua Cheng finally confronted Qi Rong, revealing his unmatched strength and authority, protecting Xie Lian and innocent bystanders from harm, and decisively ending the threat. Through these events, we also witnessed the bond and understanding between Xie Lian and Hua Cheng, showing how they communicate and support each other even without words. What happens next? Stay tuned for the next episode of Heaven Official's Blessing. If you enjoyed this episode or found it interesting, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to get the latest updates on Xie Lian's journey. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.